Sonic Frontier is the latest Sonic Team game that after a while I am finally talking about. After Sonic Forces, it seemed that Sega really needed to take a different direction with Sonic after Forces was received very poorly. After 5 years of absolutely no news from Sonic Team at all, the anticipation for the next game was ramping up, especially being the longest wait for a Sonic Team game ever. Eventually, the game will show up at the 2021 Sonic Central, and that's all she wrote. Wait till December. Yeah, we didn't get anything about the game until the Game Awards 2021, where we got some good CGI and a reveal that would be an open world Sonic game, but we didn't get any real news slash gameplay until my birthday. I mean June 1st. It's still my birthday. My birthday. IGN will do their IGN first showcase on Sonic Frontiers, and it was a terrible first impression. Instead of the first day showing off some cool, intriguing gameplay, they showed off Sonic meandering around the island doing nothing but just walking. Just walking. The second day of their showcase did show off more interesting gameplay with the combat, but even then, it was busted animations and a relatively basic enemies that the employee was clearly struggling with. And along with that, the graphics look like the quality of a PS3 game. Thankfully, future footage, trailers, and people playing it at demos would give the game a much better look, and the game was finally released on November 8th, 2022. And I gotta admit, the game was good. Sonic Frontier's story sadly doesn't actually start in the game though. No. The story really starts in Sonic Frontier's prologue, diversions, and conversions. Oh, and Tails Tube, I guess. After a Tails 2 stream, Tails detects a signal for the Chaos Emeralds on a new set of islands called the Starfall Islands. So Sonic and Tails meet up with Amy during a super badnik encounter, finding out that Eggman is trying to distract the heroes from heading to the islands as he's trying to set up shop to harness the technology of the ancient civilization that used to reside there. Using his new AI device, he reactivates everything on the island, but the device traps him in the cyberspace portal as a protective initiative. Meanwhile, after a surveillance check, Knuckles finds a cyberspace portal and gear sending him to the Starfall Islands. After fighting off the soldier bots, he runs into a mysterious girl and gets trapped in a cyber cage. Back with Sonic, Tails, and Amy, they're finally heading up on the Starfall Islands, but turbulence hits their plane and a random wormhole appears out of nowhere, splitting the three up. Sonic ends up getting sent into cyberspace and somehow ends up escaping. When he escapes, he hears a mysterious voice telling him that he has done the impossible and that he is the key. The voice continues giving him odd directions on how to save his friends, i.e. collecting the Chaos Emeralds, destroying these beings called the Titans, and tearing down the walls between reality. Assuming these tasks will help him in finding his friends, Sonic heads to discover the mystery of the Starfall Islands and save his friends. And I'll admit, the story is pretty solid. The writing of the characters for the first time in forever is finally above decent. Sonic feels like himself again, not constantly cracking jokes 24/7, constantly trying to save his friends and do the right thing, and is relatively laid back. Amy is... Look, okay, I have an issue with how Amy is portrayed in current media in general. Frontiers isn't any different, but I really don't want to go on a tangent right now, so I might make that topic a video on its own, but as for now, I think she's just boring. That's Amy now. She's just a bore. She's just boring. Knuckles is really well written though, no longer a dumbass meathead, finally a badass guardian of the Master Emerald who may be gullible, but still knows a lot about ancient architecture and stuff like that. And his interactions with Sonic are so good, I love them. They feel like the best of friends. Tails is finally back on track too. I like the fact that they acknowledge how inconsistent Tails is as a character, that he's gonna work hard to not be as inconsistent going forward. That is a really good way as opposed to just retconning it out of existence. As for the new character Sage, I gotta say I am very mixed. She's the AI that Eggman uses to harness the ancient technology, but after interacting with Cyberspace, she gains sentience and now does everything to keep Eggman. It makes you wish she just told Sonic what was going on instead of saying, "You would not understand," over and over and over again. They even mention this in the game, but the best part of her character though is her relationship with Eggman, adding some humanity to the characters that is really cute to watch and hear. Yes, for as much as I do love their relationship, it's sadly not portrayed in the game's story as much as it should be. It's sadly mainly portrayed in the Eggman's voice logs that you can find in Big's fishing minigame. And it's cute, but these are completely optional, and the admiration on Eggman's end isn't evident outside of these. Other than that though, I do like her characterization to give Eggman some humanity, but in execution it could have been better, especially with her calling Eggman father by the end of it. For somebody who just completely missed those, this can be very jarring and confusing. Also, that mysterious voice is a villain. Shocker. Yeah, this is the villain that Sage was trying to keep from getting out. The End. You see, the Ancients came from another planet, but the End destroyed their planet. The Chaos Emeralds that came with the Ancients are from space, but were drawn to Sonic's planet by the Master Emerald. But the End followed them, and after trying to fight it off with the Chaos Emerald powered Titans, the Ancients, in a last-ditch effort, were able to seal it in cyberspace, and after that, they resettled on Angel Islands and ended up mutating into the Chow. After Eggman reactivated the ancient technology, the End was able to communicate, giving Sonic the task and able to set the End free and complete its goal of ending the world. Not a very good twist villain, but it was expected. The story does start to feel a little sloppy with the lore stuff, like how the Ancients got here thousands of years ago, but the Gaia Temples and Unleashed were there millions of years ago, and other stuff that people have definitely noticed, but a lot of the ending just feels very rushed in general, like they need to explain all the lore to you before the game is over. Even then though, as long as the characters are entertaining and the story is cohesive, that's all that ever mattered to me. And it's pretty good. I like the characters here. I like how Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles are written. Amy could definitely be a topic on her own. I'll get to that later one day maybe. But other than that, I like these characters and I do enjoy the story for what it is. Moving on to gameplay, we have a ton of facets of the game to go through. So we'll start with the first thing you do in the game. Cyberspace. It's alright. These are the digital stages in the vein of regular Sonic stages from the Boost games, and they're probably the worst part of the entire games. First things first, Sonic controls awfully in these stages. I really don't know how to describe it. It's really something hard to get into your head to describe, but if you played it, you already know that Sonic feels loose and janky. Nothing feels good. He feels like he moves on a willy-nilly, and it's just not fun. Sonic in 2D also feel like he's taking a casual jog instead of going at blistering speeds until he hits a dash panel. Also, the 2D stages have a pathetic fucking roll. Shit's just sad. Of course, as this is a Sonic game, I've gotten used to the controls over time, but again, that's not an excuse for bad controls. Like, I feel like I have to, preference that. That's not an excuse. Cyberspace's gameplay does get elevated if you're a speedrunner though, mainly talking about the homing dash technique allowing you to pretty much skip through entire levels, but for casual runs it's not special in the slightest. And if you haven't noticed, the cyberspace stages use only the same 4 themes, and 3 of which being from past games. Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Sky Sanctuary, and a new environment called Eternal Highway. Not only are the environments shameless rehashes though, now the actual levels are. Some of the levels are taken from Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Generations, and Sonic Adventure 2. This is so unoriginal, it boggles my fucking mind. Now, not all the cyberspace stages are actually taken from previous games and remade. Some of them, especially in the latter half of the game, are made from the ground up, and these levels are actually pretty solid. It makes me wonder why they didn't just make original levels in the first place. Now, I will admit, Frontiers does make these stages feel very different, but they're just cut up sections from different games. This is just lame. The level design is fine, but the levels are so short and insanely easy that none of them really stand out, and the originals are just so much more enjoyable. These levels have no challenge, no interesting spectacle. These stages are just mediocre. The stages add in these missions that'll give you vault keys for Chaos Emeralds, but the missions are pathetic. The red rings are placed in locations you'll find by going the normal route as opposed to the better or more explorative one. The S rank times are extremely easy to beat, and getting rings is definitely not a challenge. Cyberspace is mediocre at worst, but it's definitely the worst of the boost formula. Even Forces had decent spectacle and the decency to have original level design. Moving on to the next thing you'll experience in the game though, the open zone. Sonic Frontiers' biggest thing is the open zone, and honestly, it's pretty good. Starting with how Sonic controls, I can admit it finally feels good to control Sonic in a 3D space after 23 years. Moving Sonic around doesn't feel too loose or too stiff, it just feels good. They include sliders to suit certain options to your own liking, like the turning speed, starting speed, etc., and they even give you two preset modes to start out with: action style and high speed style. The high speed style plays more like a traditional Sonic game in terms of how fast Sonic is and how close the camera is. The action style just zooms out the camera and makes Sonic really slow. Even if you're not too familiar with Sonic games, I recommend you do not play in the action style. It is unbearably slow. Overall though, in terms of control, Sonic controls very well though. In terms of physics though, there are some clear issues. Jumping kills all your momentum during a jump, setting you back to your default speed. Sonic has no weight to him either. He just stops on a dime after you stop touching the analog stick, and that's very jarring. And for some reason, Sonic has the insatiable thirst to stick to the ground like he's got glue on his shoes. I have no clue what's up with that. Moving on to actual moves though, Sonic has a few array of them. Sonic has a new bounce stop move, which is actually pretty cool. It can be pretty useful in cyberspace when platforming and is a decent offensive move for crowds of enemies. There's also the drop dash. What? Yeah, nah, this is shit. The drop dash sucks in this game. Of course, you get no momentum at all, and it just feels like a pace breaker unless you're rolling down a really steep hill or you're using it to climb up mountains. That's the only thing it's really useful for. Sonic can also enter a faster state of boosting after collecting the max amount of rings called the Power Boost. This is a much faster boost and is honestly preferred when it comes to traveling the islands, as the regular boost isn't the fastest thing in the world. Sonic can also climb on climbable walls in a similar vein to Sonic Lost World's parkour, and it's a neat mechanic, but for the most part it's mainly done via automation like dash pads, and when the game makes you do it on your own, it is very buggy and broken. It is not acting right half the time. You'll sometimes go up the thing when you're going down, sometimes Sonic will just turn upside down, he'll stop running for no reason at all. It's just so fucking broken. Other than that though, I'm happy to say that we have a Sonic that finally controls well and has a decent array of moves. It does have its issues, like I mentioned, with the lack of momentum and physics, but other than that, I think Sonic is still fun to control here. He doesn't feel like a chore to control like the Boost games or the frickin' Cyberspace stages or Sonic Heroes. He's good to control. And again, you have your personal sliders to make him control like Sonic Heroes if you're a maniac. Now on to the actual open zone itself. There's a bunch of things you can do in the world, with them mainly being collect memory tokens via platforming, combat against regular enemies and guardians, and challenges to reveal the map. You see, Sonic Frontiers has a pretty simple gameplay loop for all 4 islands. Take down the guardians to obtain portal gears, use portal gears to enter cyberspace stages, complete missions in cyberspace stages to unlock vault keys, and use vault keys to unlock chaos emeralds, and take down the Titan. A pretty decent gameplay loop, but I will admit, after a while, it does get exhausting. Once you get to Chaos Island, the game starts showing its aware and becoming mostly 2D challenges, which in an open world game is kind of a bad move. As the main appeal of open world games like this is the fact that you can freely explore, but in Chaos Island, the world is littered with dig spots, which on other islands would give you things like keys and memory tokens, are now dash pads sending you flying into inescapable 2D sections. You also need to collect memory tokens to progress in the story with a friend of that island. You collect memory tokens by doing these little mini obstacle courses throughout the island that are designed like Sonic levels with springs, dash pads, and a whole lot of rail grinding. And I gotta admit, I do enjoy these little mini challenges they have here. Even if they're not the most insanely designed challenges, but they're just fun to do, especially with the very nice camera angles they do at times. But like I said, once you get to Chaos, the formula runs out of steam. But for the most part, they're so short you can never really get tired of them, and just the feeling of running around them is such a joy, especially going back after learning the layout of them to get them done faster. And once you get to the latter half of the levels, mainly Uranos, they can get pretty difficult sometimes. Sometimes the game will also have a bigger obstacle course that usually leads to a Chaos Emerald. These are also really well designed. Having a Sonic that controls with decent level design goes a long way, it seems. Cyberspace. Moving on to another thing you can do on the open zone is combat. Yes, Sonic Frontiers adds combat into the game. With actual enemies you actually have to fight. It's a mixed bag though. Starting off with the actual enemies you can fight, let's talk about the variations of them. You have these standard enemies which differ on every island. These guys usually don't put up much of a fight. The soldiers are just, the same thing with slight differences every island. Nothing too major, up until Oranos where they're just basic enemies that don't put up too much of a fight, but you can take a little while on them. But other differing enemies on each island are very gimmicky. Psyloop here, Homing Attack there, Stomp here. Nothing too special about these enemies, to be honest. Next up are the Guardian enemies, and these vary drastically. Some of them I really like, some I find fine, and some I really don't like. Most of the Kronos ones are decent. I find Asura can be a little janky at times, but I do love the idea of Sonic running up on its arms and taking it down, but in execution, this thing was held together with duct tape and a paperclip. Squid is a fine boss fight. For one, its title card is a fucking jump scare, but it's really just you running on a path until you hit the boss and dodge some basic attacks and silent but chill. Ninja is probably my favorite boss of the island, to be honest. It throws out more attacks and is a good boss, teaching you how to dodge and parry. And lastly, there's the tower boss, which is actually not bad. I do like the fact that there's multiple ways to take out the layers, with the easiest being to side loop and having to dodge the missile it fires, and I like being able to just jump on top of the main head and take it out from there. Moving on to the Ares bosses, Shark is probably the worst boss in the game. It's just annoying as hell. It is a long QTE section that is no good, and you just kind of wait for it to wail around and just hit at it. This is not fun. Strider is a good idea for a boss fight, but the execution is also very meh. The projectiles that fire in its second phase are so unpredictable, and the jump not being locked to the rails makes it 10 times harder for no reason. Tank is actually a pretty good boss though. I like its Samsung section, but I really do wish it did something during the phase where Sonic can attack, other than just sitting there. Other than that though, I do enjoy the boss, and being able to get in a quick side loop before it enters its Samsung phase is so satisfying, trust me. Sumo was another favorite of mine. Having to bounce off the walls to get a good combo is very awesome, but again, I also wish it just did something while being stunned. Spider is a pretty cool boss. I like the skydiving section. Again, I just wish it didn't try to run away after the section. And Fortress is just a squid, but it drops bombs and he's on rails this time. Fine. Moving on to the Oranos bosses, Caterpillar is weird. Its rail section is a better Strider, but its attacks in 3D are so horribly telegraphed that it makes certain hits feel very unfair. Ghost is probably another favorite of mine though in the game. It takes a mini obstacle courses and turns it into a boss fight, which I love. Also, the later islands, mainly Oranos, bring back the older Guardians in a more upgraded fashion, which makes them some of my favorite bosses in the game. The fight with Kanochi and Master Ninja feel like full-on brawls with actual enemies now that dish out hits, with them giving a lot more offensive moves. Red Pillar and Silver Hammer also start to become extremely tall, and finding creative ways to hit their heads start becoming a must for taking them down. The Guardians in the game are fine though. A lot of them are good and are fun, but a lot of them can just be boring and unremarkable, especially with the lack of challenge, when some of them just stand there and shake so you can get in hits on them. It's very lame. Of course, in combat games you have to have a lot of their moves, and Sonic Frontiers has a whole new arsenal for Sonic completely. A lot of these moves though are sadly just cutscenes that deal damage via a button combination, which at times can override useful moves like air boosting into a homing attack or jump. Sure, a lot of these moves are clearly more deadly than others, mainly ranged attacks, but all these moves start to feel like they overlap, with slight variations like the Cyclone Kick and Spin Slash, the Cyclone Kick launching multiple enemies into the air, and the Spin Slash just attacking in a more wide radius. And these effects don't even have any effects on Guardians. Another issue with the moves is the complete lack of them. The skill tree is very small and can honestly be completed by Ares Island, making you realize how little moves you have, causing you to probably reuse the same moves over and over again. They do look cool though and are well animated, giving the combat some very nice flow, and it's kind of one of my favorite parts of the game. Sure, the combat isn't very deep, but the stylish motion makes it way too much fun, especially with the more offensive enemies like Master Ninja, Kunoichi, and the Orano soldiers. Being able to chain over these stylish moves, while not challenging, is pretty fun. Another few moves related to Sonic's combat are the basic punch and kicks, which are pretty nice looking to be honest. The Psyloop, which is not just used for combat, but is used in combat to launch enemies up into the air or put special effects on them. This can also be used for puzzles and stuff like that. The game also has RPG elements in the form of the stats you gain from giving Cocos to the other Cocos, and you can give Seeds of Power and Seeds of Defense to the Hermit Coco. Speed making you faster when you climb up walls, and gives you the power boost no matter the ring count when you max it out. Ring capacity so you can carry more rings, and strength and defense are pretty self-explanatory. The Elder Coco is hell to deal with though. He only upgrades your stats one at a time manually, and it can take an hour to get to max stats completely. I hope you really like the Coco song, cause you will be sitting here looking at this shit for hours. Sonic also has a parry like in a bunch of combat games, but unlike those games, the parry in Sonic Frontiers doesn't fucking work like a parry. Usually you have to time the parry successfully, but here you can hold it practically indefinitely, not only letting you be invincible to most attacks, but also stop you from falling in midair, basically giving you an easy way to avoid pitfalls. And also, Sonic Frontiers' hit system is different. Instead of losing your rings when you get hit, you lose your rings once you hit the ground, so if you can stop yourself from hitting the ground somehow, whether it be air boosting out of the hit or parrying out of the hit, you'll keep your rings. Where Sonic Frontiers' combat really shines though is the Titan Dash. I will give up to the end of I have no clue what inspired Sonic Team to finally make Super Sonic feel like a badass again, but they fucking nailed it. Now, sure, the actual combat is pretty much the same. Cutscenes with button prompts, and the spectacle in these boss fights pops the fuck off. Sonic fighting back laser beams, throwing a dragon into the side of the wall, slicing the knight in half. This shit is absolutely fucking insane. And why yes, I'm not at the presentation section yet, the music in these fights is so fucking good. All the songs are just so good and get me in the perfect mood to fuck these stupid robots up. Another thing you can do on the islands are these challenges. These are pretty much not too difficult puzzles that are used to unlock the map and fast travel across cyberspace portals. These are fine, I guess. They do try to get harder at the end of the game, but at the end of the day, they're pretty simple. Things like the panel puzzle, basketball, or Tetris are just kind of whatever to me. The race the clock ones are cool though, but they give you so much time that it's really not even a race. Other elements in the game though are things like the quest and island mysteries. These quests usually contain missions that involve the Coco, and they're inoffensive at worst. They're cool, they're fine, but nothing really crazy, and you tend to forget about them after you do them. The dancing animation is cool though, I like that. The island mysteries are usually puzzles that lock the Titan fights behind them though, and these are just weird. The crane game is a baby game, but the fucking light puzzle is some shit that will make Albert Einstein cry his eyes out. Then there's the bullet hell minigame, which is pretty cool I guess, and then there's the pinball minigame. Yeah, this one sucks. The pinball minigame is deadass just pinball, which I get it, it's a Sonic staple, but one, you only get 3 lives, which, alright, fair enough, but the point requirement to actually continue, 5 million points. The only way to really get to that point level is when you do collect all the red star rings to get the highest multiplier, but it is still a fucking challenge to get. It took me like 3 tries this recording. I am not joking, 5 million points is fucking mental. There's also this random island event called Starfall, where meteors fall from the sky. This triggers all enemies and guardians to respawn on the island, and the meteors act as a currency for the slot machine that appears on the screen, which rewards you with purple coins. And what do you need purple coins for? Why, fishing, of course. Yeah, hidden away on every island is a portal to a fishing spot where you need big and are able to fish for purple coins to gain fishing tokens, which is where you can trade them for in-game items to help you with aggression like memory tokens, cocoa, seeds of power and defense, etc, etc. Honestly, it's a really overpowered way to get certain items in the game. It's so easy to just rack up enough of these tokens and just spend like hell. It's a fine mini game, nothing to write home about, but it's quite relaxing compared to the rest of the game, which I think was the intent, especially with them lo-fi beats. Can't believe I just said that. The Monster Hunter DLC pack also added these fine enough costumes, but there's this BBQ spit mini game which takes no purple coins, and on the later islands can give you up to 24 fishing tokens on the last one if you cook the meat perfectly. Speaking of which, the entire endgame of Sonic Frontiers is pure hell. So after Chaos Island, you're thrown onto Rhea Island, where you climb 6 towers and shut them down and learn more about the lore of the ancients. Sonic's cyber corruption grows more and more though, so where he ends up being fully corrupted, and this is when the end explains its plan to destroy the world. So after a little bit of hand holding and sealing themselves back into cyberspace, Sonic's friends drive back the corruption, and now he needs to work with Eggman to obtain the Chaos Emerald so Sonic can take down the end. You then move on to Aranos Island, and it's just you collecting emeralds and doing a few island challenges. The problem doesn't come from the gameplay loot, but more so how it's presented. Rio and Aranos both use the same environment as Chronos, and it feels like they just ran out of budget and time. Oh wait, they did. And it doesn't just end at that. The final Titan fight with Supreme is just fine. It lacks any of the spectacle that the other three had, and surprise, it's not even the final boss fight. No, there's another secret boss in the end's true form, and it's just the bullet hell minigame again. This entire endgame was just one splash of disappointment, which sucks because I think the game started off really strong. Overall, I think Sonic Frontiers is a fine game, but really fumbles in the latter half. Chronos and Airy Islands were fun to explore with their platforming sections and some of the combat being pretty fun, and the other things it had to offer were great. But by the time you reach Chaos Island, the loop feels a little exhausting with issues like the abundance of the 2D sections and the island starting to feel bland. And I already mentioned my issues with Rayo and Aranos, like I said. To wrap up this review, we're finally going to talk about the presentation, and it's a pretty mixed bag. Starting with the animations, they're fine enough. Sonic pretty much retains his animations from Forces, which I didn't have anything against, but this time they finally add an idle animation, so that's a pretty good improvement. The combat animations here are also very well done. I like them all for the most part, the homing shot being the only outlier here, to be honest. It just looks weird with Sonic just shooting out, homing attacks? Like multiple? That doesn't even look good. Then there's the cutscene animations, and these can vary. You see, the actual cutscenes in the game are pretty good. They're very expressive, and I do like how the characters are animated here for the first time in a while. As for the side story cutscenes though, these are...
I can roll with it now that I know it's alien tech, but it's still a bit weird to me. Like, why are the villages missing when everything else is so detailed?
The ancients had a difficult time adapting to...
These are bad. The point of these is to be like RPG cutscenes where in the game it plays with animations depending on what the characters are saying, but these are just really bad. At times it seems like they would be better off just using visual novel animations. The characters' mouths don't sync up with anything they're saying. They turn around on a swivel and it looks absolutely awful. It's just no. As for the music in the game though, I gotta admit, it's a pretty good soundtrack if you ask me. I do enjoy the more EDM like Cyberspace tracks, especially the lyrical ones, and the island themes, while not being the most memorable, fits their environments really well, and I do catch myself humming along to them most of the time. The Guardian tracks are also really good. I dig them a lot in terms of their atmosphere, and I've already said my piece on the Titan themes. And the main theme, I'm Here, is so good and so catchy. I'm happy more epic sounding lyrical themes are back with this one, and I just love it. There's also 2 more lyrical themes in the game, Dear Father being the credit theme, which is very emotional. I will admit it had me kind of tearing up on my first playthrough. And then there's also One Way Dream by Nate Wants to Battle, and also a pretty good song. I like it. I know people say this is like some wannabe Linkin Park, but like, I don't know, it just feels cool. I like the song. One thing I don't like though was the art direction. I've always found Sonic in a realistic environment very bland, and this is that in spades. None of the islands really stand out besides their ancient ruin sites, and cyberspace is cyberspace. I do like Eternal Highways theme, but I wish all the levels were like this and all original. This game also has a few bugs. Nothing crazy, but there's some here and there. The Asura boss fight as a whole, the shadow texture sometimes not loading after cyberspace, Sonic's skin texture being broken because of the subsurface scattering not working correctly, whatever the hell this drift is, the collision of a fucking rock sending you flying in Chaos Island, and probably the most egregious thing, the poppin'. Something everyone called from the first time the game was even revealed, the poppin' looked terrible. Items would just pop into existence, and it's hard to tell where you're looking for certain obstacle courses sometimes with this. It's very annoying. And your tracking shot doesn't look very cool when the grass is just popping into existence. Let's be real. That's it though. That's the Sonic Frontiers review. Yeah, I'll admit I do enjoy the game a lot. Things like the story, cool combat animations, the Titan boss fights make the game worth coming back to, but sadly the game fumbles a lot. At the finish line, it just falls apart, and I don't think this game is worth the $60 fully priced video game that we have now. Games at this price are becoming fully realized games and are becoming really good, and Sonic Frontiers still feels behind, lacking some of the basic fundamentals of a 2022 fully priced video game. But that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Sorry if you didn't enjoy. Bye-bye.
We're only at the beginning of this one-way dream.